Hi Simon, how's it going?
Very well, thanks. And you?
Yeah, good, thanks. So look, I'm really keen to talk to you about security architecture. It's great you've come to talk to us. I just want to make it clear, and you can as well, that this is Simon's own personal views. It's not the views of his current or previous employer. So let's just wanted to make that clear. Let's talk about careers, because I know this is another topic that when we had our pre-call, we had some interesting discussion about. So I think it's interesting, the architecture profession, and I guess particularly security, is hard to kind of it's hard to kind of find an entry level role for that, right? And that's why you don't generally find a junior architect, because it's kind of a bit of an oxymoron in a sense, in that you need to have experience of perhaps a different role that is then an entry role into the architect role. But I remember you sort of, I mean, I have this analogy of microwave meals and Michelin chefs, and by that I mean, I think when it comes to training people and educating people, there is the sort of Michelin starred chef way that can perhaps create you any recipe from the raw ingredients, because they know the raw ingredients inside out, they know all the methodologies and the techniques. Or you've got the person that can warm up a microwave meal, who effectively knows where to go and find them, where the microwave is, and to slap it in and and warm up a meal. So for me, there's kind of, I think the cloud and various days of abstraction is in danger of creating people that understand how to microwave meals rather than really understand the nuts and bolts and nitty-gritty. But I remember you were saying some interesting things to me about that the other day. What's your sort of take on this?
I think you need a balance. I mean, when I recruit, at any point, I'm always looking for that T profile.
Right.
And by a T profile, I mean a broad experience of everything, but some depth in one specific area.
Yeah.
I think the other thing with architecture is the best architects I've ever worked with haven't necessarily been the best technical ones. They're the people who can build those relationships. A lot of what we do is negotiating, sort of facilitating, influencing those sorts of skills that, because we need other people to do things to complete our sort of mission, as it were, to make to enhance security. So it's got to be that rounded profile. I think one of my advices to everybody, especially, I mean, I've had graduates working for me who through a graduate program, and they've been brilliant. And I think the ability to learn is the critical thing.
Right.
So, back to your microwave versus Michelin starred, if you take something like crypto, actually, how much crypto do you need to be an architect in I don't know, any form of company that isn't a crypto specialist? If you work for someone like Thales, who provides crypto, you need to really understand crypto. But do I need someone who's got a master's in mathematics and can manually sort of do that crypto analysis? The answer is probably not. What I need is someone who can be effective of getting the right controls in the right place and explaining why we need them. And so I think it's a bit of both. I think if you haven't got the experience and the scars from implementing in other areas, it can come across as very academic. I've read the book, I've not. Whereas, you need a bit of that sort of taking the knocks of implementing, but not, you don't have, that doesn't have to be all you've ever done.
Yeah, and the ability to sort of see beyond the world that you're in and look left and right and understand where the kind of bigger picture fits in. Yeah, okay. Clearly the world looks very different to what it does, say, 30 years ago when I was sort of learning technology. And I suppose at the upper end of the millennial sort of category, who have sort of seen that transition and older, who've seen that transition from, I suppose, the analog world of cassette tapes and a VHS and punch card and all those sort of things. I mean, punch card's a little bit before my time, I must confess.
I know which say I've never used
massive, great big floppy disks are definitely my time. They're kind of the 5-inch ones, the CD-ROM sort of size ones, and CD-ROMs are multimedia. In fact, as a side note, I'm on a bit of a mission to bring back the term multimedia. I think it's a brilliant word, and I want to bring it back. Anyway, I guess my point is there's been folks that have seen, I suppose, the transition, the world before digitalization, and then there's been folks who effectively have come into their career and they've only ever known the internet and email and various things. And I suppose for them, knowing what the manual fallback option perhaps might be when these things aren't available isn't as easy to kind of, I suppose, connect your head with when you've sort of lived through the analog era.
No, I also think that there's a real difference as well in architecture and security specifically. As you go back to when you were first learning computers, you couldn't get a security course. that it might have been covered in computer science if you were lucky. And so what you got was people who went into different roles. So I went into development and I developed and then came into security. People have gone into sysadmin roles, network roles, and then they've taken that experience out. What we're now seeing potentially is a number of people coming in with cybersecurity degrees. And that's brilliant for having that firm foundation. But then to be a well-rounded architect, I think what you need to do is go and work actually on a delivery project or something like that, so that you've got that, you understand the pressures that the program managers are on, so that then when you get challenged back, you can understand, you've walked in their shoes, as it were. And I see that's one of the things I've always recommended people with a security-based degree is go and work on a development team. Right. Even if we can do a job swap for 6 months. Because that, I think, is a brilliant way of doing things as well, is if I can get 2 engineers to swap, one from security, one from delivery, it's brilliant. I get an engineer back that understands delivery, and I've got someone who then goes away understanding security and now is embedded in that delivery team. And hopefully they take the messages with them that they learned with us.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot to be said for shadowing, and obviously it's difficult to do that now, right? Because it was certainly a lot easier to do that when people could physically go and sit next to someone and see their world for a few days. Now it's a lot. I guess you can be added to their Zoom calls and added to their SharePoint documents or something. I don't know. Maybe that's the equivalent these days of shadowing someone. But no, I think it's often overlooked, and people think you need to go on expensive training courses and this, that, and the other. And actually, you're right. That first-hand experience of just rubbing shoulders with some people in slightly different roles, like you say, can be incredibly useful, can't it? Beyond that, what advice would you give someone who is looking at the cybersecurity world as a profession? What do you think it is that just sort of get to grips with a bunch of different things? What would be the sort of couple of tips you would give someone who is looking at cyber as a career?
As in wanting to get into cyber?
Yeah.
I suppose if you're already in IT, there's loads of resources out there now. There's free training. You've got, look at the work you're doing and how does security build into that? Because nobody's sort of unhappy if you're doing some extra work alongside what you're doing that improves the security of the end product. That's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Lots of companies now start security champions programs. They're another great way to sort of get involved in security and get that visibility, capture the flags, both internal and external. And it doesn't have to be you don't have to go on science courses to get a job in security. You can go and talk to the security team. You're generally surprised how welcome you are, because we're generally not used to people coming to talk to us. It's usually the other way around. But that's one. That would be sort of one way. I think sometimes it is very difficult to get that entry level position in a security organization, especially if you don't necessarily have the qualifications and degrees.
Yeah.
I think times have moved on now where there's CV sifting. So if you've not got these things, it doesn't it really becomes more difficult. So I think in that respect, getting into a role and then looking to move into security is a much more efficient way of sort of getting there.
Yeah, I do find it frustrating that companies are just sort of almost trying to sort of do a tick box exercise on candidates, rather than my approach to recruitment is always what's someone's sort of base aptitude and attitude and ability to learn. As we were saying earlier, it's all about learning.
Yeah.
And so, of course, if it's a senior role, that's different. You need certain experiences. But if it's an entry level role, I tend to hire far more on ability, potential, rather than on what's someone doing now, or what do they know now. Well, as long as they show the passion and the keenness to learn, then you give that individual the right support, and they're going to mold themselves into a really good member of the team. You can normally be pretty confident about that. However, on the flip side, I've seen many people that claim to know loads of stuff, very confident, perhaps overconfident in their abilities, somewhat arrogant in their ability, and don't feel they need to learn, feel they're already perhaps the finished article. And actually, on paper, they might look amazing because they've got various certifications, tick, 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 tick. The recruitment system has put them in your inbox, but the reality is, are they actually the right person for the job? Arguable.
The company culture is really important there as well, because once again, to be successful, it's not just the technical skills, it's how you're going to work with your colleagues, how you react in given situations, what are your default actions. You're not going to get that through the CV sift. But yeah, it's if you hire for potential as well, you then get round that the issue of a skill shortage. So if people are willing to learn, can learn, and shown that they previously learned, that's a great indicator. And security is changing daily, hourly. It's such a fast-moving environment. If you sit there and say, "Well, I learned this all 10 years ago," there's you're
completely out of date with the latest computing, ephemeral computing, and so on. So
you're still coding on Java 6, and the world has moved on.
What do you think makes for a good security architect? What is your sort of top 5 or top 3 to 5 sort of attributes that you think a good security architect has?
Firstly, a willingness to understand the context of where something's operating in. I mean, ultimately, we are in a binary industry. It's ones and zeros, but what you're trying to achieve as a company is critical. So, having that viewpoint of looking at that. I think the other thing, like all architects, is really important to be able to step back and look at the slightly bigger picture rather than focusing on the immediate deliverable, because then you can start to see those options. And I think a lot of what architecture sometimes bring is we become a sort of a glue or a mechanism to connect other people. So, I can see that you're doing this over here and this team's doing something similar. I can sort of be a sort of marriage broker to bring those together. So that's those sorts of attributes. On a technical level, I think you do have to have that, for me, some experience in an area but also be able to deliver it. For the people who've worked for me, I always expect them to be able to articulate the business benefits of why we do things. And if they're working on a specific program or project, what are the project deliverables? So they've got skin in that game. From a technical side, there's so much. It's always interesting when you see job adverts which say, "I want 10 years experience of this," and you think, I was seeing those in 2005 for XML. And it's like, well, XML's, other than a sort of niche language and taught at college, it's not really out there at the moment. How can I have 10 years experience? Back to that, showing that you've learned, you've got a track record of learning new stuff. And I suppose finally, there's this underlying thing of how security works. So whether that's the, confidentiality, integrity, availability sort of triangle, or something else, but coming back to those fundamentals, that you can be given a problem, you draw it back to say, who should have access, what do they need it for, how can we prove it, how can we make sure data is not changing, those sorts of things I think really are key.
Staying on the CIA triad, so the confidentiality, integrity, availability triad, what's your take on the availability piece of that? Because I think confidentiality, integrity, I think we can kind of firmly agree that that's in the sort of security realm, but availability, what's your take on that?
I think this is where you have to figure out what you're accountable for. Are you a security architect, so doing the architecture of security, or are you an architect that also covers security? Because I think there's a very big difference. So if you're the architect of a solution, then availability, I think, sits 100% with the architect of solution. So if I'm building a web app that people will log on to, availability in terms of planning and utilization, that sort of stuff has to become part of their role. I think the security architect is accountable for making sure that the solution is available when it's being attacked, or at times when it's under stress from a external threat type thing, rather than actually it's Black Friday and all our servers have gone down because we didn't do any stress testing. Yeah. I think if you're an architect, though, it is 100% on you to say, whether it's security or not, to say, guys, you need to look at your resources and how can you cope? What's your stress test levels like? But for me, at the end of the day, if it goes down on Black Friday because all of the servers have been overwhelmed and we didn't have auto scaling groups in and we haven't done any planning, I think it's a bit harsh to blame the security architect for that.
Well, Simon, it's been fantastic. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Great stuff.